Hi guys, my name is Anna, and today I'm going to be reading Illusive by Emily Lloyd-Jones. Now this book initially drew me in with its beautiful cover and for its X-Men-like plotline, and so when my local book club decided to pick this for our book of the month, I decided, okay, I guess it's fate, I have to read this, right? So spoilers for pretty much the rest of this video of this book here, Illusive. I will give a very quick summary, however, for those of you who do not know what Illusive is about. So Illusive is about a teenage girl named Cerie, I believe that's how you're supposed to pronounce her name, living in a futuristic world where a deadly plague swept the world, and the vaccine, the cure for the plague, had side effects that caused certain people to be immunes, which are mutants, basically. And these different immunes are registered in the system as immunes, and they can either work for the government or they're considered criminals. And it is about the girl Cerie, whose immune ability is where she can blend into surroundings, kind of like a chameleon, but she can also shape these surroundings to look differently to help hide her better even more. And there are all different kinds of immunes in this book. There are telepaths, there are people who can mind control, there are people who have like super sensitive and can control them, like they can decide to, like they have super hearing and then they can focus on just their hearing, on just their vision, you know. And then there are those who can levitate in the air, sort of kind of like flying. And then there is perfect memory, and there is like perfect instinct. So there's an interesting variety of abilities in this book and there's normally like an example for like each ability on the different characters. So it's interesting to see the contrast of how the abilities work. So the main character, Cerie, is a criminal, and the book begins, and quite frankly, it kind of deterred me at the beginning. The teenage girl, Cerie, wakes up in a hotel room after robbing a bank, naked, with her best guy friend lying on the floor, passed out, cops banging on the hotel room door because they figured out that she is the bank robber and she is staying in the hotel. So I didn't really feel it necessary to have some of the more adult themes that were in this book. I felt like they were kind of put in there only for kind of shock factor, and I felt like, and not that there's really anything wrong with having some more adult themes in a book, but I felt like this one did them. Ow! I just freaking, ow! I guess this book is offended with me for bringing out some of the negative things I had with it, because I just totally managed to whack myself in the face with it. Bad book. I ended up liking you anyways. But I ended up liking the book anyways. I'm just not a big fan of like adult themes used like purely for the point of shock factor. You know, that needs to have some kind of plot or meaning or emotion behind it. You know, not just shock factor. But it really picked up the pace after that, and I ended up really loving it and actually ended up staying up till like 2 a.m. to finish it. So I ended up being really glad that I picked it up, even if the beginning was kind of iffy for me. So that is the end of the spoiler section for this review. So come back after you've read this and we can finish discussing it. So bye for now, guys. So Cerie ends up working a job with her mentor friend Kit, and Kit can levitate. And he is mainly an art thief, and she lives with him. And she works with Kit and her friend Devin, who is the passed out guy in her hotel room, who also has perfect memory. And they end up working a job to find the cure that was supposedly destroyed many years ago by the creator of it when he killed himself and his family. So this job in search for the cure has many different complications in it. The main complication being the fact that Cerie was noticed by a gang and who is forcing her to pay a hefty sum of money for robbing a bank in their territory. So she has the gang on her back, and the FBI is also hunting down Cerie, Kit, and her crew because they are also hunting down the cure as well. And then when they find the cure, it ends up finding out that the cure is not in a vial or written out in a letter. It is in the head of a teenage boy who also has the ability of perfect memory, who happened to be the long-lost son who was thought to be dead of the original creator of the vaccine. So the plotline was pretty straightforward, but God was the pace fast, and it was really exciting, and Devin was the main character who had comic relief, and I thought it was balanced pretty well. It wasn't really cheesy or anything, you know, there were some genuinely like funny lines. I really liked the majority of the characters. I liked Cerie herself. She was pretty interesting for a main female protagonist. Her powers were really interesting, and see her kind of grow more into them and learn how to use them more, because the end scene where she tricks the mind controller who was working with the FBI, Artiasis? I'm not sure how you say that, and she tricked him into thinking that she killed herself in the fire, but she had not, and she outwitted him. I thought that was really amazing, and they showed that she had some development herself as a character. I liked Devin, not quite as much as I did some of the others, but I thought his funny comments were pretty nice, and I'd like to see some more exploration of him as a character, a little bit more about his backstory, because you only know the littlest bit about his, you know he's British, and his family came over from England, you know, and his father's really wealthy, you know, and he felt alone because he kept his abilities a secret, you know, being a immune, because, you know, you don't want to be targeted as an immune, so he would purposely fail tests and things when he could have, you know, aced them without even trying, because he, you know, had memorized everything that he ever read. So I thought he was interesting, but not quite as much as the others. And I actually really loved Kit. I loved the contrast of him being this deadly knife thrower to this kind of souffle baker, you know, who was tending the garden and things like that. How he had this very strong contrast of a personality. And I found him really interesting to explore more. And then I also loved Magnus, who was introduced. And it seems like I'm fated to love almost every single character named Magnus, because reminds me of Magnus from... I'm always standing in front of this series, but that reminds me of Magnus from the Clockwork Angel books, The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare, and also The Mortal Instruments, but I don't like The Mortal Instruments as much as those books. He reminded me actually a bit of that character because they had slightly similar personalities, you know? And he was actually a male prostitute who is also a telepath. And he ends up joining in the job with Kit and the gang, and he and Kit have some kind of past relationship. They work together, you're assuming on some kind of military thing, because they both are really good at shooting guns and knife throwing and beating up people, even people who have super strength, you know. They can still like beat them up and things. And I was wondering, it seemed like there was a hint of maybe a romantic past there between Kit and Magnus. I'm not sure. But I could be looking into it way too deeply, but I thought I saw a little bit of hint of maybe something happening in the past there that might, I don't know, be continued further in the series. You might learn a little bit more about how they met one another and how they mentored the artist, this guy. That would be something interesting to explore. And then there is Daniel, whose point of view you had, and he was abducted by the FBI and was forced to work for a section of the FBI, which is like the immune control center or whatever for the immunes, and they actually have immunes working to kidnap the other immunes. And one of the immunes is the Arteus that I've continued mentioning, and he has the ability of mind control, and so he was controlling Daniel, who was the other point of view character, for pretty much the entirety of the book, really. So I felt like I didn't really get to know Daniel that much if he, is continued maybe in another book or something, because I didn't really feel like I got to know him as well as I did the other characters, because of the fact that his actions weren't really his own, and you got to know a little bit about his thoughts and everything, but not quite as much. I didn't get a good form grasp of who he was as a character like I did the others. So all in all, despite some of the needlessly adult themes for shock factor and having a relatively basic plot line, the characters were all really likable, and the pace was ridiculously fast and exciting, but without feeling overly rushed. Everything was tied together pretty nicely, but the series could definitely continue if they wanted it to. So I'd give it maybe a 4.3 out of 5. So I really liked it, and it would even be one that I wouldn't mind owning at some point in the future, because this copy here is my library's edition. I know, ugly, terrible library edition, the gems, but it doesn't bother me. Would not be one that I would not mind hanging out on the dear old shelves at some point in the future. So if the sequel came out, I would probably read it. So I do recommend it, especially to ones who have a fan of the sci-fi, slightly futuristic vibe to it. And they did deal with some messages of equality and things about that, about how the immunes were feared and locked away, even if they weren't necessarily criminals. You know, some people were just trying to live their lives, so you would hide the fact of what you were, you know, in testing and things like that. And some of the paranoia that comes from humanity fearing something that it feels like it can't control, which also goes to the themes of inequality in many different topics, you know, of people's sexuality, of people's gender, you know, of their race. That is a very hot topic now, the equality, and it's very important. And so that message should come through a little bit in this book. It wasn't like a big, you know, it wasn't like really the main theme of the book, but it was a slight undertone to it, which is always nice when books try and have a positive message that they're trying to portray. You know, so it did remind me of the X-Men in that way, where the X-Men do have that positive message of equality in it that this book also has. Bye, guys!